Hey, Alexandra, a formidable and intelligent YouTuber with more subscribers and overall knowledge than I have. Her videos seem to generally revolve around writing, prose, original ideas, and art. Her oldest video is 2 years old. To be redundant, she's smart and well spoken. Clearly, she is well read.
London. Michaelmas term lately over, and the Lord Chancellor sitting in Lincoln's Inn Hall.
What's the problem? She recently made a video titled Bad Prose Epidemic. The video is of high quality and is easy to understand. However, that does not mean I don't have some gripes with it. In fact, I have many issues to take with this video. In fact, I think this video may be incredibly damaging to inspiring authors. I won't go so far as to call her a pseudo-intellectual, because for the third time, this creator is very intelligent and presume well read. The video is definitely coming from a place of experience, education, and standards. That being said, doesn't mean it is objective, because it isn't. The video is laced with pedantry deployed in an attempt to highlight and diagnose cultural decline, particularly in literacy and writing prose. These are both legitimate problems. Americans and people in Western countries in general are reading less. They're engaging with less dense material, if they're engaged with any reading material at all. Our apps and social media platforms are designed to capture our attention, and the format of these platforms has detrimental effects on our attention span and critical thinking skills. With that being said, this video is a huge swing and a miss. Fortunately, there is some pushback in the comment section of this video. They're kind, constructive, professional, and insightful. With that being said, there are a lot of seals in the comments that's basically agreeing with her or congratulating her on a video that is well articulated, but is misleading and generally kind of wrong. And this is coming from someone who has made a lot of poorly written videos. I am straight up retarded in many of my videos. Fortunately, I have grown a lot as a person. The first major issue I take with this video is the thesis. The title indicates that it is going to talk about prose. Prose, simply defined, is ordinary or spoken language that follows natural speech patterns, standard grammar, and paragraph structures instead of rhythmic meter or rhyme. Prose ranges from informal speaking to formal academic writing. More broadly, prose is any writing that adheres to standard sentence and grammatical structure. In other words, prose is writing that lacks the hallmarks of poetry and song. In other words, prose is regular writing, the kind of writing that isn't constrained by stanzas, meter, rhyme, or any other stylistic formatting. Anyway, the video opens with a study about The Bleak House by Charles Dickens. The study shows how English majors struggle to paraphrase the opening of Bleak House. In other words, they're tasked with reading sentence by sentence The Bleak House and translating it into modern parlance. The results? Well, many students couldn't entirely process Dickens' work. They had a tough time translating it. To Kate's credit, she acknowledges many parts of The Bleak House are not readily accessible to modern readers.
Half of the literal prose in the passage, leaving only 5% of students who were deemed to have proficiently understood it. Admittedly, the opening to Bleak House is difficult, with lots of antiquated terms we don't use anymore.
This isn't due to illiteracy or poor reading comprehension any more than me not being able to understand something written in Latin being indicative of whether or not I'm illiterate or lack reading comprehension. I mean, technically, yes, I am illiterate when it comes to Latin, and I won't be able to comprehend anything I'm reading in Latin. However, she rightfully acknowledges that the Bleak House is written using some archaic words with some archaic prose.
Still, the study supports the anecdotes of many teachers and professors that students, even English students, are struggling to read. Not just getting through a long book, but reading on a sentence-by-sentence level. In other news, the latest online book controversy has been about bad writing.
Could this be the most controversial book of 2026?
In terms of writing style and storytelling, it's giving someone's first attempt at writing something ever.
Everything is over described. A lot of the words don't fit the story.
The feeling is personified in my stomach. I have to yield to a conglomerate of pedestrians.
There is a long and proud tradition of clipping a sentence out of context to make fun of a book with. From Twilight's iconic khaki.
These are two different phenomena. One is not understanding a dialect from another time. One is generally not understanding what you are reading because you are generally illiterate. This is ultimately a non sequitur. Is the video about illiteracy or modern day prose and bad writing? Now, we could argue that bad writing is a result of illiteracy. I would be on board with that thesis. There are probably examples of books out there that are unintentionally emblematic of illiteracy and poor education. But as we'll see, that isn't what this video shows. It becomes a critique of writing style based on personal preferences, disguised as a critique of prose. I was taking a gander at the comments, and there were two out of the hundreds that I read, and I only saw this come up two times. It was ironic. The creator of the video, at 4 minutes and 29 seconds, uses the phrase too overly.
This is a downside of trying to be too overly prescriptive about how you can or can't write something. These rules almost never accommodate the best writers.
Checkmate, Kate. It's a bit redundant, isn't it? What kind of prose is that? Clearly, we shouldn't be taking advice from someone who could let a simple mistake undermine their entire message without prose. I'm honestly not being facetious. That is the type of pedantic nitpicking that this video deploys, as well as many of the commenters. Not all, but many. If this is the standard the video creator and commenters are going to apply, then we're going to apply it to the video creator. The fact that you made this mistake implies that you're not to be listened to nor taken seriously. So during college composition, I was curious. I wanted to know where many of our grammatical rules come from because we're always taught them. So I looked up some of them, and turns out a lot of grammatical rules have their origin in the preference of single authors or journalists that somehow just become a bona fide rule. One, never splitting the infinitive, comes from Henry Alford, Dean of Canterbury. Two, never ending a sentence with a preposition comes from John Dryden, poet, because wasn't elegant. This isn't an argument against grammar. Grammar is crucial, especially in an academic setting. However, being a grammar communist certainly goes too far. Why am I bringing this up? Because the author quotes George Orwell's Politics and the English Language, where he lists rules for clarity in language.
And what even is good prose anyway? George Orwell had a lot of thoughts on how prose should be written. Orwell was a journalist and brought this trained, systematized style to bear on his own fiction. In Politics in the English Language, he lays out certain rules by which authors should work. Never use a long word where a short one will do. Never use the passive where you can use the active. Never use a foreign phrase, a scientific word, or a jargon word if you can think of an everyday English equivalent. Which is all obviously sensible for new writers.
To use an overly used phrase, this is an example of quote mining, which is a dishonest debate tactic where a person takes a sentence or piece of a sentence out of its original context to make an author look like they agree with a point they actually reject, or a quote used to support something that they never stated. Now, when it comes to Kate, we have three options. Kate is either dishonest, she doesn't understand the quote, or she only knows of the quote's existence without understanding or knowing the work that it came from. She learned it through cultural osmosis. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt and say she probably just admires these as general rules or guidelines. Fair enough. But I really don't believe her.
Applying standard rules of editing to Shakespeare isn't just pointless, it ignores what makes him so great. Shakespeare takes the idea of having errors and makes it part of his style. So, sure, rules exist to be broken, it's impossible to define what good prose is. But though these rules might not be able to define good prose, when it comes to bad prose, I know it when I see it.
She then proceeds to treat two young adult openings as self evidently clunky under precisely the kind of rule bound, one image at a time, does this metaphor make sense under laboratory conditions scrutiny. However, she should have included the quote from George Orwell: break any of these rules sooner than say anything outright barbarous. In other words, as Kate states, to unintentionally give validity to this rule that she didn't attribute to Orwell, the purpose of the writing and intention or avoidance of an atrocious sentence supersedes the previous rules. Immediately after listing these rules, George Orwell then says, I have not here been considering the literary use of language, but merely language as an instrument for expressing and not for concealing or preventing thought. In other words, throw these rules in the garbage and shoot it with your choice of cartridge and set that fucker on fire. What does Kate do? She moves on to criticize young adult novels. When the video deploys a partial Orwell quote to police the figurative density of commercial young adult openings, it isn't to defend the English language and prose. It is to turn this specific quote into a way for her to support her contemporary taste, which is lean, concrete, and low metaphor. So let's highlight the issues of this video. So far, we have two non sequiturs and a bait and switch. We have a study that doesn't at all prove illiteracy, and we have quote that is more akin to speech writing, and we have a bait and switch between talking about illiteracy and bad prose. There are a lot of things I could cover in this video, the double standards for one, but I mainly want to go over the criticisms that are going to be the most damaging for newer authors and upcoming writers. Because in reality, anything you write can be nitpicked. The real thesis of her video, that is couched in language around proper prose and literacy, is that modern day authors need more editors to basically rework their command of language, i.e., it's not good enough to spell check, grammar check, and ensure there are no major glaring plot holes. Your metaphors, if they're not perfectly logical, should be avoided.
To make my criticisms very specific, I want to analyse the first pages of a couple of novels. I struggled over whether or not to do this. As I've said, I think critiquing prose can sometimes miss the forest for the trees.
Missing forest for the trees is exactly what you're going to do.
Bear in mind, though, I'm not an editor or a reviewer. In fact, I've deliberately picked books to analyse that I haven't read beyond the first chapter, so that I'm just judging the prose, not the book.
How are you going to critique only the prose without reading the book when the prose needs to be taken in context with the rest of the book? Of course, this is entirely dependent on the specific aspects of said prose you take issue with. However, as we'll see, there are examples of prose that she nitpicks which are entirely dependent on the book. Secondly, you're not an editor or a reviewer. Okay, so why did you make this video in the format that you did? Most of this video is critiquing prose with non sequiturs as fluff in the beginning.
The first novel I'll be looking at is Alex Astor's Light Lark.
Ironically, this woman's nitpicking of these books encouraged me to actually want to check out some of the books that I normally wouldn't have read or ever have heard of.
For now, let's start with Chapter 1. Isla Crown often fell through puddles of stars and into faraway places, always without permission, and seemingly on the worst occasions. Even after 5 years, portaling still made her bones groan. She held her star stick tightly, her breath bottled in her chest like the rare perfumes on her vanity, the glass rooms spinning and fractured colours bleeding together until gravity finally pinned her down like a loose thread in the universe. Okay, up front, I'm a bit confused as to what's going on. I'm not clear on where we are, or what a star stick is, or what's happening.
You have to be a complete dunce to not understand what's going on in this sentence. Puddles of stars is a visual description for either adventure or portals. Easy. She's been doing it for several years. Based on this reading, I assume she's traveling through portals, and the author is conveying metaphorical language because you can't really describe dimensional travel in a way that makes sense to the human brain. Therefore, the gravity simile indicates that she is falling. Who cares that you don't know what a start stick is? It's the first paragraph. Clearly, it is a tool or device, magical or science fiction or both, and it makes you say and ask, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what a start stick is.
Alex Astor has started her story in the middle of the action, in media res, and we're presumably about to get filled in on some of the missing details. That said, is the opening needlessly confusing? Astor is using some descriptive language to set the tone and atmosphere, which means that the passage lacks concrete details. So my first stop in editing this will be to see where we can switch out poetic descriptions for specific details. I think generally most people would agree that red penning a book is a pretty low kind of criticism. Plenty of classic works of literature don't have great prose. Bear in mind though, I'm not an editor or a reviewer.
If you, as an editor, which you claim not to be, understand what in media res is, then why the hell are you asking how we can get rid of poetic description to make it less in media res?
We've got two similes in the first paragraph, both in the same sentence. Similes and metaphors tend to remove us from the immediacy of the situation by putting a different image in our heads. Having two in one sentence means that we're dealing with three images, the thing that's literally happening and the 2 points of comparison. You can imagine how much more impactful this passage would be if we were given a really clear visual image of Isla tumbling through the portal. A really good simile depends on a good comparison. A lot of famous ones are now cliches. For instance, his voice was as smooth as silk.
I just love how you define what makes a good simile, despite saying that it's hard to define what bad prose is, and that there is a problem being overly prescriptive about what good prose is.
Silk puts us in mind of something expensive. We're implicitly being told that the speaker's language is elegant and refined. You could also say his voice was as smooth as glass, which basically means the same thing, but glass doesn't have the same connotations of expense and luxury. I'd argue Astor's first simile doesn't work in this respect. When we're talking about bottling our breath, we're invoking something carbonated that bursts open when the lid's taken off, much as someone might gasp for breath after holding it for too long. But perfume is only used in tiny amounts, and the lid is never opened, so the comparison doesn't quite work for me.
If the perfume comparison doesn't work for you, who gives a rat's ass? As an editor, it isn't about what works for you. It's about what works for the audience. This metaphor only doesn't work for you because, as we'll see, she hates metaphors. I can't even wrap my head around this pedantic ass nitpick about the perfume and breath. Here's how dumb it sounds to nitpick the simile. He ran as fast as a cheetah. Well, a human running requires two legs, and humans are more biologically adept for long distance and well paced running. A cheetah, on the other hand, is on all fours and is more adept to cover short distances at impressive speeds. So the comparison doesn't quite work for me. Yes, gasping for air and a perfume bottle are unlike. Imagine that. A simile is comparing two unlike things. Hey, Alexandra invents a required mechanical correspondence. Bottled breath must behave like a pressurized beverage that explosively releases. And then faults the text for failing a test it never took. The actual comparison is about something rare, carefully contained and held under pressure in a private space. The vanity. Breath held tightly in the chest during a disorienting magical transition is being likened to that of a contained rarity. The carbonation reading is Kate Alexandra's projection and preference. Metaphor does not require one to one physics. If it did, half of English poetry would be illegal. One way we could solve this is by asking the author what she intended, because I could be wrong. But at least I'm not nitpicking metaphorical language and pretending like I'm an intellectual.
Let's look at the second simile. Gravity finally pinned her down like a loose thread in the universe. Again, I don't think the comparison is a strong one. Loose threads are too small to be pinned down by gravity. It's quite complicated, especially given that we've just had another simile earlier in the sentence. There are a few other small things that jump out to me. Isla's bones groan at one point. Groaning is vocalized, which bones can't do.
It doesn't matter. Bones can't groan? I mean, duh. A man can't run as fast as a cheetah. You don't literally save your money for a rainy day. It can't actually rain cats and dogs. Cats aren't actually blind. Dogs don't sleep. Life is literally not a roller coaster, nor can a roller coaster experience life. A stone in your heart might kill you. Humans aren't owls, nor is it optimal for humans to stay awake during the night and sleep while it's day.
Did Poppy shriek so loudly that terror runs in, or does Poppy shriek as terror runs in? Tara's knives and swords clanking together seems odd. If she carries a lot of knives and swords on her belt, why are they arranged in such a way that they clatter when she moves?
Knives and swords clanking together is description, so to focus on their arrangement is so fucking stupid. If we applied this logic to everything, Foley artists and field recordists in movies would never have a job.
Okay, I know what I'm doing is kind of annoying. Like I say, going through with a red pen and picking out prose that doesn't work is a very low kind of criticism. My main point is that strong opening images are always better than atmospheric prose. Atmosphere is a byproduct of clear, distinct scene building. Unless it's intentional, a reader shouldn't be grasping for details of where we are and what's going on.
The issue is that you don't believe metaphorical language creates strong opening images, but I do. And according to whom is atmosphere a byproduct of clear, distinct scene building? Atmosphere is a byproduct of scene building, mood, tone, and suspense. See, soft science and non science intellectuals are the worst. What you call grasping for details is what I call mystery, suspense, and intrigue.
I want to look at one more book, this time a debut novel, Molly X. Chang's To Gaze Upon Wicked Gods. It's a bestseller which had a lot of traction a couple of years ago. Again, I haven't read the book and I'm not very familiar with any discourse around it, so I'm coming to these first paragraphs with as fresh an eye as possible. The sky was crying again. All around me my world wept. Grey, icy tears caressed my skin, shivering cold in the late summer heat. With deliberate steps, I passed the fence that carved my city into halves, guarded by Roman soldiers and their white-knuckled grips on the guns that haunted our nightmares, ready to shoot me down over perceived slights. Okay, so we have some clearer images. Our protagonist is walking past a fence, looking at enemy soldiers. However, the first 3 sentences are all about rain. This is a technique called an objective correlative. It's when something in the setting mirrors how a character is feeling. Our protagonist is feeling sad and angry, and so the grey drizzle mirrors and externalizes her emotions. It's a handy technique, but it can feel overdone very quickly. Dedicating the first 3 sentences of your book to describing the weather, even if it ties to our protagonist's emotion, is to me a bit of a waste. I think there's more interesting things happening in the scene than the rain.
Basically, we have clear images, which is what she prefers, but she doesn't like it. This nitpick is the pedantry that I was talking about earlier. I hope that the non sequitur nature of her video is clear. What does this have to do with illiteracy? What does this have to do with prose? This is entirely about your preference. The grammar is fine. The syntax is clear. We have clear images which are good, right? No, actually, they're not good because they still deployed this other method of writing that I don't like. Yes, there are more interesting things happening than the rain. That's why the subsequent sentences have nothing to do with the rain. It's a poetic sentence, and then it's done. Yes, neither tears.
The word caress doesn't seem quite right here. Neither tears or rain caress skin, and the word seems too loving and gentle for the image that's being built.
Nor rain caress skin. Obviously, here are words and concepts for you. Personification, which is a figure of speech that gives human traits, feelings, or actions to non human things like objects, animals, or ideas. And we have anthropomorphizing, which is giving human traits, feelings, actions, or forms to non human things. And caressing, it's too gentle or loving. So she's brought up a few times in her video the notion of author intention, but she hasn't expressed whether or not she's contacted the author or sought out interviews or statements explaining this scene. But we can kind of guess what's going on here and what's going on with the author or what's going on with Kate Alexandra in particular. So there's 3 options. Kate Alexandra is being too literal with the word caress. Now, if we shift to the author's point of view, caressing, while being an affectionate gesture from someone, can be unwanted from another person, which would imply molestation or another wrong action. As an example, a grown man caressing a little girl can be taken in one of 2 ways. It's his daughter that he's caressing affectionately, showing fatherly love, Or this accurate description can also depict something that is very dark and wrong. Number three, this one to me is also kind of another obvious one. It's meant for juxtaposition or antithesis. These are two opposite concepts to show contrast.
This next sentence is clumsy. The fence isn't guarded by Roman soldiers and their grips on the guns, it's guarded by Romans who are gripping the guns.
The Roman soldier nitpick is annoying as fuck. This is the style choice, and there is no grammatical rule indicating that there is anything wrong with writing guarded by Roman soldiers and their white knuckled grips on the guns. This is simply pedantic nonsense, and you're annoying.
It's unclear if the last part of the sentence is referring to the soldiers our protagonist is looking at right now, or the guns in her nightmares.
The original sentence is clear, vivid, and grammatically coherent to any reader who isn't hunting for problems. This is forced ambiguity that only a pedantic asshole manufactures. The part of the sentence where it states that the Roman soldiers holding guns and their white knuckled grips is a classic stylistic expansion of soldiers themselves. No one honestly believes that it is introducing a second independent subject. Ready to shoot me down clearly attaches to the agents. For someone who is so hyperliteral, Kate understands this. She knows guns don't haunt nightmares, as she knows that bones can't vocalize and groan.
Let's look at these next two sentences. I hated these men, hated their stern foreign faces and foreign attire from beyond the shimmering portal high in the somber sky that now joined our two realms. That's a lot of world building packed into one sentence. I wonder if the shimmering portal in the sky is best saved till later, given we still haven't learned our protagonist's name. If it were to stay, simplifying the sentence would help to clarify what's happening. High in the somber sky can be cut down to the sky. We know the sky is high and we know it's raining.
The bit about the portal not having too much world building, I mean, we know that the setting has a portal, and we don't even know our character's name yet. That's her nitpick. Oh no, this is just really dumb. This standard is never applied to any fictional work in existence. Imagine if someone nitpicked the Terminator for introducing robots traveling through electricity before we learn the name of Sarah Connor. Imagine someone nitpicking Star Wars because it introduces the Empire, the villain, the damsel in distress, and the droids before our main protagonist. And I know someone's going to retort with the Star Wars scroll giving us exposition. It doesn't count because we don't know who that name applies to. Again, this isn't prose, it is personal preference.
I think generally most people would agree that red penning a book is a pretty low kind of criticism. Plenty of classic works of literature don't have great prose.
But you might be a melody, a forgotten tone for our ears, from God to calm my tears. So why would you go missing from me? If I could have you, oh, I would be complete. Yeah, one day will come when you might finally agree. That now is over. the past is gone. The future is set, and time's still killing me. Time's killing